This episode of What's the Story podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels and is now available in USA, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand and the EU. We have an exclusive offer for all of our listeners today. When you head over to manscaped.com, use the code WTSPOD and you'll get 20% off and free shipping. So go on ahead, join the movement and the 2 million men worldwide who already trust Manscaped. Did you know one bloke every hour, every day is diagnosed with testicular cancer? Testicular cancer is the most common form of cancer in men aged 15 to 35. And this month Manscaped are working with the Testicular Cancer Society to spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. In addition to providing the right tools and solutions for safe and easy grooming, we're encouraging you to check yourself at least once a month, and if you find anything that seems untoward, any lumps, bumps, anything painful, any new swelling, get it checked out properly. Give your doctor a call and make sure that nothing sinister is brewing. Together, the Testicular Cancer Society, Manscaped and WTS Pod are all committed to raising awareness for the most common form of cancer that's affecting these young men. We're also giving support to fighters, survivors and families of impacted by testicular cancer as part of the We Save Balls initiative. So make sure that you're checking yourself regularly, you're keeping yourself looking fresh and tidy by using those Manscaped tools, and remember, when you join the Manscaped movement, you're taking care of your balls in more ways than one. Head on over to manscaped.com to learn more, and also use the code WTSPOD at checkout and you'll get 20% off and free shipping. Your balls will thank you. Hello everybody and welcome to WTS 233. Now the Americans love when we say 33.
Yeah, so do the Aussies.
The Aussies do as well. My name is
I made one sale in my job in Australia based on how I can say 33.
Jesus. They're odd, aren't they? People are odd like the things they like. I don't think there's any accent in the world that I would ask somebody to say a specific phrase like.
No. I don't think so.
People are mad.
Probably when you have a few jars on you.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, my name is Danny Murray.
I'm Graham Merrigan and welcome to What's the Story podcast. Danny,
yes.
Who are we speaking to this week?
That's it, Graham. Straight in, no kissing, because the guest we have this week is absolutely fantastic. And there's no better way to introduce her than to jump straight in. So here we go. Absolutely delighted to say this week we've been joined by a woman who knows no frontiers when it comes to travel, and it might sound weird, but she can't wait to get off this planet. She's an engineer, an artist, a performer, and she's a writer, and she's going to have a chat to us about all things space and why she's so fascinated by space. Dr. Niamh Shaw, thank you very much for your time and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Niamh.
Lovely. Thanks a million, guys. It's lovely to be on your show, and you guys have been doing podcasts for so long. You're showing us all how to do it, so I'm delighted to be on. Delighted.
It's a pretty low bar if we're paving the way.
No, but you know what I mean? In the last year, everyone and its mother has done a podcast, but you guys have been doing them for years,
Yeah,
that's what I mean,
that's nice of you to say. Yeah, it is. It's mad how much they have. They've kind of.
I love them because I've always leaned towards radio anyway, because you can kind of be doing something else while you're listening, and you do feel like you're having the conversation. Like really great podcasts make you feel as if you're there, or they tell stories and stuff. So yeah, it's great. I have to say it's great. It's great that they've exploded. And,
it is.
Yeah, it was about time, because it was very niche for a very long time, and then it was like boom, it exploded.
Yeah. The topic of space itself is one that there's a whole abundance of podcasts on. I mean, nearly anything that Neil deGrasse Tyson is on, I'm trying to listen to as often as I can, and there's a whole host of them. You yourself, you've got your one that's going as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's called Humans of Space. So I think I'm just always really interested in people, so So facts for me have to be connected to people in order for me to find them interesting. And I find that that's what I'm most interested in too, when I try and kind of share the stuff that I'm fascinated about. And I think it's because it took me so long to let myself pursue my curiosity in space. I'm always trying to break down, how do people have that kind of self-belief to do something, to have the career that we all kind of wanted. So Humans in Space is me having conversations with, and it's the people that just don't give up are the people that eventually kind of get there. That's what I'm learning from it, and I found that very encouraging. Very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we can all take something from, I think.
Yeah.
But it's like, even that kind of list of people there and those professions, like a space architect. What is a space architect?
Oh man, it's the coolest job. So really creative, but also really mathematical people. So they so, if you imagine it, like, in this world, there's four walls, you take a breath in and you can breathe out because you have oxygen. There are walls, there are tables with objects on it. So, you make assumptions that gravity is throughout your house, right? But you take gravity out of the equation, you have to design a structure to keep a human safe. So it has to be, it has to be completely sealed, airtight, and pressurized. It also, you also have to think that there is no longer up or down. There is just walls. So, then, and also the space, the actual volume occupied is at a premium, so they have to design structures that are strong enough to keep humans safe, but also that there's really smart storage solutions, and that the sanitary conditions are more than likely recyclable. So they're involved in the early stages of designing kind of toilets that remove the urea out of urine and then recycle the water from it, and they're just and then engineers kind of get involved, but they come up with the original concepts of a lot of kind of space structures. So they're very interesting people.
So if we do get to Mars, these will be the fellas that have designed the apartments and the houses and whatever that we
yeah. Like if you look at if you go onto the European Space Agency's website, so they're kind of now, everybody's talking about going back to the moon, and but so the first 2 years they'll be orbiting the moon and dropping down from time to time, some humans, but long term want to set up a kind of permanent, what they call a habitat. A habitat is a building. Any building that's not on Earth is called a habitat. And they have a kind of a video. I mean, it must be about 6 or 7 years ago already, but it's like amazing. And so architects would have come up with the original design, and you have to think about, how do you get it there? And then when you get it there, how is it going to be built? It's not even what it's made of. Really smart people, really smart.
Too smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is it weird that, like, I mean, the moon landing all those years ago, 67, 68?
69. 21st July 1969, yeah.
69, like, and then we're all these years later, and it's kind of as if we got to the moon and it was kind of like, brilliant, that's great, little bit of excitement then for a few more years, but the kind of space exploration kind of fall off a little bit then, like, why haven't we really gone back to the moon, or why all these years later are we looking at the moon again and saying we're going back there?
It's always politics or economics, unfortunately, that drives a lot of innovation and the forefront of the new frontiers. So the moon of the 1960s was ultimately the Cold War being rolled out in lower Earth orbit, as we say, or at the moon. So that was really a race between the Soviet Republic and America. And they were competing with each other. So in 1961, before we ever got to the moon, NASA had been set up a few years, and they had the Gemini program, and they were trying to get the first man in space, and Yuri Gagarin beat them to it 60 years ago on the 12th of April. And And so from that, they were just competing with each other. So America had to have something, because Russia had the first satellite, it had the first man in space,
First dog.
First dog. So they had to do something. So what happened really was just that the real wizard of the driving force of the Russian space race, he died. And then when he died, kind of everything kind of fell apart. And then America finally did get to humans on the moon, and who knows what would have happened, if it had been the other way around. So what happened was that you had this moment where people couldn't comprehend that there were two humans walking around on this celestial object that we look up in the night sky every night, and that there was two people up in it. And it kind of, people just, it had this effect. I think nearly everybody I know who is under 40 has been, or over 40 has is a part of space because of the moon landings. Like it's impacted them in some way. Either their parents passed it on, or it's inspired. It's a massive part of why I love it too. It suddenly shifted what we could possibly be, and it changed the boundaries of who we are as a species, that we can somehow, these little kind of tiny parasites that are living off a planet, had the intelligence to spring themselves off a planet that pulls them, towards the center because of gravity, that they can go fast enough with a really basic controlled explosion and propel themselves to this thing that shines in our night sky. I think it really kind of blew people's minds. They were like, and to this day, people still think it didn't happen because it's just so difficult to get your head around. So that happened. And then once that happened, the general public kind of started losing interest. They were going, well, they've done it anyway, So, but really the science was really starting to get interesting. And, we managed to get a few moon rock samples. But what happened then was, America went into a different era, and so, funding for space kind of dropped off. And then they did keep going. They had Skylab. So Skylab was a space station that orbited Earth in the 1970s, and it was amazing. It is still, without doubt, like the sexiest one that's ever been. It was huge. They had a shower in it, like a proper shower, and it like all this really fancy food. And I think it was inspired by I don't know if you know the movie by a guy called Stanley Kubrick called 2001 A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
So that was like, they had like Pan Am women, and they were kind of delivering food, like it was like a plane, these guys going to the moon. And I think that came out in the late 60s, and I think it really inspired NASA to come up with something amazing. So they made this huge space station, but unfortunately when it launched, it got damaged. There was only ever 2 missions, but it was hugely it was really courageous. And since then, everything has been downsized, and space is a premium. So it's much more like living in your garage. Actually, it's like living in kind of the all the wires and the cables of your house. That's kind of what it's like to live in the space station, it has been going on all the time. It's just that the public awareness of it has kind of gone down a lot.
And you kind of have experience of living in space in a way. You've kind of been to Mars, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I guess I have, but it's nothing like what the real thing, and it's only and it's funny. Even that, like, it profoundly changed me. So what I did was, so for people who are specialists in the science of space, for want of a better word, there's different kind of categories. So one of them would be a type of science where they're trying to determine life in extreme environments, and they're called astrobiologists. And then you would have people who are looking at the landscape, so that would be geology on Earth, but there's also a kind of geology of Mars or the moon and stuff. So they don't really get a chance to practice their skills of collecting samples, on Earth. So there's these facilities that are created around the world in extreme environments. So they'll be in extremely cold places, extremely hot places, places that look like Mars or the moon, places that are underwater, places that are on volcanoes or in polar regions. And people go there to behave as if they're on in an extreme environment, whether that's Mars or the moon. And it allows them go outside in the field and try and collect samples as if they're on these different planets and live in those conditions. So it has benefits for psychological studies as well as science studies. So anyway, there's one of them in the middle of the desert in Utah called the Mars Desert Research Station, and it's run by the Mars Society. And you apply with a kind of a scientific protocol, a series of experiments that you want to run. And I was invited to join a crew of astrobiologists and geologists and an engineer. And I was there as kind of the engineer and scientist, but also kind of the writer and the artist. And I wanted to capture the whole thing from start to finish because I'd never done anything like this before. I wasn't even in a Girl Guide or anything like that. And this place was in the middle of nowhere, but it really did look like what I imagined Mars to be. It was all this, the soil and all the hills and everything, they were red. And so that's because there's iron in the soil. So on the outer surface, it oxidizes with the air and it goes red, the same way rust does. So that's also the same on Mars. So that's why that location was picked. And we behaved for just over 2 weeks as if we were on Mars. So just to let you know what Mars is like. So Mars has a very thin atmosphere, so it's thinner than here. So if you were to clap your hands on Mars, you wouldn't get that nice sound that we have, because that's because our air is at a different pressure. So the pressure of Mars is a lot thinner, and there's no oxygen in the air. It's carbon dioxide, 95% carbon dioxide, and the gravity is a little bit lighter. And obviously there's nothing there. So you go in you're given a ration of water and a ration of food, and you live in effectively a garage. It's called the habitat, but it feels very much like going outside and living in your garage. It's all sharp corners, nothing, everything kind of stripped back to its bare minimum. And the heating system was just this ducting of gas, of a gas heater, basically, that was blowing hot air throughout the place. And every time you went to the toilet, you only could flush the toilet for number twos, not number ones. There was an option to shower once in the 2 weeks that we were there. I went in for about 3 minutes, but it was so miserable because the pump isn't, you've no kind of sewage line, you've no mains water, you've nothing like that. You just have to use a pump to get your water from outside in. And the pump is like a basic pump that makes this sound like when you go to turn the taps on. So every time you flush the toilet, it would go because it would be pulling water from this tank. Or you go to wash the dishes, just in literally like two inches of water, and it would go and so you get a trickle of water. So you got very used to washing your hands with a trickle of water. You got used to, drinking the least amount of water that you absolutely need. And you became obsessed with your water supply, and food became literally just fuel, and you got up, the day would be composed of, like, you'd get up at 7, you'd sit around going, right, what are we doing for the day? You have to get permission from mission control. So you have to do a kind of an email thing to mission control. They're virtually away, and they look at the weather and they tell you whether it's safe to go outside or not. And then you suit up. So, we didn't actually have the real suits that would be required to live on Mars, because the second you go outside of Mars, it's like, it's a death trap. So you have to have proper pressurized suits. But we had a kind of a flight suit. It's basically like the way mechanics wear a kind of a boiler suit, or like an overall. It's kind of like that, except there's kind of badges on it, because that's what they do in space. They always have a kind of a patch for each mission and stuff, but it's effectively like a boiler suit. And then we wore this very heavy helmet and this backpack, and the backpack it was a fan that was supposed to keep your helmet free from condensation, but it didn't really work. So you go outside and your whole center of gravity is off, because this helmet and backpack is so heavy. And it was extraordinary. I was terrified. If you put a foot wrong or anything, you do yourself some serious damage.
What was the food like, Dave?
Food is really salty. It was all just sort of powdered stuff. So you had like powdered egg, powdered butter. You added water to everything. In the first days, you could bring in some food the first days, like fresh. That's gone within 3 or 4 days, and then you're down to your basics. I didn't really mind, to be honest with you, because I wouldn't really have a great sense of taste. But the fellas were great. So there was myself and Michaela. We were the 2 girls, and there was 3 guys: Roy, Idris, and Rick. And they were amazing cooks, and they somehow managed to make magic out of that powdered muck that we had to eat. I don't know how they did it, but we were there for 2 weeks, and I genuinely started feeling I was on a different planet. So bizarre, because you have no external stimuli. You don't have television. You're not getting any phone calls from. You're not on Facebook. You're not online. The only time you go you go online is to talk to mission control, and you have to do these daily reports. And the day would just fly by. You were always behind. Everything was always broken. Every time you went to do something, it didn't work. Our experiments just didn't work because everything is so incredibly difficult when you strip back life. And it made me start to think about, what do I need? And like, I haven't missed anything in my house. I haven't missed anything. Like, I had everything I needed, and I only had like 2 pairs of trousers and 4 tops, and I had my computer stuff and my camera stuff. I didn't need anything else. And so when the mission finished, I remember we were incredibly close. You become very connected. You can tell immediately if someone's tired, if someone's off, and the slightest thing would create tension. Like a family, very much like a family. And I think very much like the way we're surviving lockdown. But we left. Yeah. We left on the last morning, and my heart was breaking leaving, because life just got really simple and it got really safe, and you didn't have to deal with anything. You didn't have to deal with money, earning money, or paying your bills, or all that just was gone. Just literally had to just do these experiments and get up and hang out with these people that weren't bad company and go to bed, and like there was some of those days were extremely tough, but by the end you get this sense of achievement. Anyway, we go for breakfast in this tiny little village. It's the nearest town, the facility, and it's horrible, but to us it's like a palace, because I had pancakes and bacon and coffee. And I went into the bathroom. We decided we were going to spend the day together, because the whole surrounding area is like national parks. And I go into the bathroom, and I just went for a wee, and I got up thinking, you don't flush the toilet for number ones, you only flush for number twos. And I went, oh yeah, that's right, I have to flush it again. And I flushed it, and I was in shock with the pressure of the water. It just, having realized that your urine can be taken away by, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 liters of water. This felt like 15 or 20. I don't know how much it is in a flush, but it was literally 20 times more. And then when I went to wash my hands, I'd been used to this, like this splatter of water. And now it was like just ridiculous amount of water. It's like, oh, that's so wasteful, and it made me really think about water differently. And I remember I came home and I was embarrassed that I lived in a place that seemed so big, and also that I had, my hot press I was particularly ashamed of, because I had all these towels and all these duvets that I don't need that many, and all these things like cushions and throws, and it just changed. And from then on, I started giving away stuff and downsizing, and now I live out of 2 suitcases, and I have a few kind of mementos and stuff in storage. That's like that, and that was 4 years ago. It's incredible the effect it had on my life.
Yeah, so it really was life changing. Then, like, it's
it was. It just made me reappraise what's really important. That's what it did.
We'll be right back to our guest, but first we got to take a quick word from our sponsors, Manscaped. Now, we already know that Manscaped are the global leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. And we already know that they offer the precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. We're part of the 2 million men worldwide who are already trusting Manscaped, and our town halls have been immaculate for quite some time. But what I'm really here to say today, and what I'm really happy with, is to work with a company that's doing so much to help support something like the Testicular Cancer Society, and to help spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. Testicular Cancer Society and Manscaped are committed to raising awareness for the most common form of cancer in men ages 15 to 35 with their We Save Balls initiative. So when you're down there and you're giving yourself your trim using your Manscaped products such as the Lawnmower 3.0 or Crop Preserver or Crop Reviver, give yourself a check for any lumps, any bumps, any swelling or any pain. If something seems unusual, get it checked out. Manscaped recommend checking yourself once a month. So make sure you're doing it, lads. And if anything is sinister, if anything's there, catching it early is really important. Check yourself regularly and make sure that you're not only keeping yourself neat and tidy, but you're keeping yourself safe too. Head on over to manscaped.com to learn more. And remember, when you use the code WTSPOD at checkout, you'll get 20% off and free shipping. Now, back to our guest. And in terms of what's important for you, it is the number one thing for you then to get to outer space. You've kind of experienced it in a way. It gave you a flavour of it. So is the big ambition then for you to get to Mars, or does it will that be possible in our lifetime, or is it more so you just want to get out of the atmosphere and see what it's like and what it's all about?
Well, I'll tell you what it is. I really so astronauts will tell you whether they go to the moon or whether they spend a couple of months up on the International Space Station. They all talk about this change in perception of themselves and of what life's all about when they see the Earth in one eyeful. You know what I mean? So when you get the chance to really pull back and see everything, it just changes your perception of what's really important. And that's what I want to do. And I want to, for me, it's about experiencing that so I can write about it and I can talk about it. And what I like to do is I think sometimes science and engineering are fundamentally very easy things to understand if you have the ability to explain it in a way that everybody can understand. And that just requires years of really understanding something. And I really like the challenge that I like to challenge myself with that, right? So if I can do that, and people know that that's kind of the thing that I do, imagine if I could see that and I found a way of describing it that everybody got it, then how could we change our perception of ourselves as a species, and could we change the way we prioritize things, and could we be better to the planet, and could we be better to each other? So that's what I want to do, because when astronauts see it, some of them find it very difficult to articulate, but it's spiritual but not religious. It's like they see Earth as fragile, that it's like alive, that it's in charge, that we're not in charge. It's in charge, and it's in a constant state of seeking balance. So if something happens on the left side, the right side is impacted. So for instance, Robert Thirsk, if you listen to the podcast, the interview I had with Robert Thirsk, who is an incredibly he's really human, and he really gets the bigger message of what space is. He says, you see a fire on the east coast of the world, and as the wind blows across, if you see a fire on the west coast and the wind blows across to the east, you'll see that those cities have smog or whatever, and wind on the left hand side then carries across and causes a storm on the right hand side. So we only see it from our own town or our city or our country, but when you see the whole thing together, you see that it's all connected. So the quicker as a species we all work together and think together, the better we'll probably all get along, but the better our relationship will be with our planet. So the big dream for me would be to spend some time on the International Space Station or getting to the moon and being able to see that, but for long enough that I'd have time to sit there and go, I actually can't fathom what I'm looking at, and then and share it with people. Then most importantly is to find ways of sharing that, as writing it or performing it or speaking about it or whatever, talking to schools, talking to families. That's the dream. That is it. And it started when I was 8 years old. And it's funny, it's always been in there. And it took me years to give myself permission to allow someone like me possibly achieve something that impossible.
When you say someone like you, Niamh, how do you mean?
Well, I grew up in a normal house. I was third of four. I'm an average student. I'm a hard worker. I wasn't exceptionally talented at maths. Wasn't exceptionally talented at science. The only thing I'm good at is talking to people and connecting with people. And I'm okay at writing. I'm not exceptional at it. I'm okay. So I'm okay at a lot of things because I work hard and because I'm very curious. So the two things that I know are my strengths are, and I'm fascinated by people. So, I wasn't an A student. My leaving cert was okay. It got me into engineering in UCD. I was an okay engineering student. I wasn't top of the class. And that's the way it's been. Even my PhD, it was okay. I've always been middling. You know what I mean? Very happy and I'm not underplaying the opportunities that I've had. I've been very lucky that I grew up in a house where, my parents said, we're going to make sure that, if you want to go on to third level education, we'll find a way to make that happen. We got the grant. We weren't particularly wealthy. I've always just been like average and Eve, but there was always a disappointment in me that when I was younger, I used to be so excited about life. And I think sometime around my teens, I realized that it didn't match the excitement of my dreams. And that's kind of the way the first kind of half of my life was. And then when I started pursuing more artistic things, the magic came back and I started kind of seeing myself differently. And that perspective piece, that has had a massive impact on how I see myself. So I think space really has the potential to make you reappraise your life.
If there are any, what are the ways, like, let's say you said at 8 years of age, you wanted to go to space, say, let's say, I know in America that when the money, like you were saying as well about economy, oh my God, I can't talk. Economics, like when the government in America want to invest in a space program or stuff like that, but like when it's coming to the end of school and you want to pick college in America, you can do these space programs or whatever. How does someone sitting down filling out their CAO forms in Ireland, if they wanted to get involved in such things, how do they go down the engineering route?
Now you see, it's really just about connecting the dots. What I realized was the people, when I interviewed them and when I started meeting Irish people at the European Space Agency and some Irish people at NASA, what I realized was that they saw someone or met someone or went to the NASA Kennedy Space Center when they were a kid, or they asked an astronaut for their autograph. That's all it was. They saw someone that they could relate to, who connected with them in some way. So the only thing that was missing for me as a kid was that there were no astronauts in my line of sight. And there was nothing in my life rooted in reality that had anything to do with space. There was science fiction, there was the moon lands, but that was all like, wow, kind of dreamlike stuff. And the great thing, there was nothing stopping me then getting involved in the European Space Agency. I just didn't know how to do it. So what's fantastic about today is that, you just need to do engineering. Anything I did was relevant. It's just that I didn't know how to transfer it. So you just need to do a science discipline. So like today, the European Space Agency has advertised for it's opened its call for astronauts, and you have until the end of May to get your application in. And it's a really straightforward application. It's not hard. And, it's a very competitive thing, which is why, so few get through and they have to invest a lot in them. But the apps, the criteria is pretty basic. If you have, if you're a science person, so you need a degree in a science or engineering discipline, a master's in engineering or science discipline, and 3 years work experience. That's it.
So it's accessible for
very people. Yeah, very, very doable. It's just that you've no idea. Role models are so important, and we are all role models. Every single one of us. A child, they say, makes up its decisions about who it wants to be based on who is their world before the age of 10. So if you grow up in a house where you're seeing space on TV, but it's not part of your everyday life, that seems impossible to that child. Whereas if they have an uncle working at the European Space Agency, it's possible. It's that simple.
Right. So Adam King is going to get the space then. That's what you're telling me.
Oh yeah. It's incredible. You just need to tell people what you want. And that's what I just was so ashamed to say it, because it seems so preposterous. I didn't want people to laugh at me.
See, it's mad that you say that, and it's mad when you're saying kind of like you're just average Niamh or whatever, because there's a weird juxtaposition here for me, because it sounds like amongst all this kind of ordinary that you're talking about, there's something extraordinary there, because you're given that angle of it, and there's a kind of can't see, can't be vibe I'm getting in terms of why you didn't kind of realise that until later in life. And then there's that famous story of Kennedy visiting the space center, and as he's doing the tour, he's walking around, he comes to a janitor and he asks the janitor, "What do you do here? What do you do here?" And the janitor just stops and replies, "I'm sending a man to the moon." I love that. In his head, he was playing the part. He was doing his bit to get someone to the moon,
Well, and that's it.
I'm fascinated by that like the optimism and the sincerity of that man and everything else that was there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a couple of 1,000 miles across the sea in Ireland, Niamh there, and she's like, "Well, I can't do it because sure, nobody else is." It's just a weird balance, like it's.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's mad. It's just with the people you surround yourself with, and your perception of like. And this is the thing about space. I'll tell you about the distances and stuff in a while. You need to look at your perception of reality. It's that simple. So the boundaries that we place on ourselves, if we're not in situations that we cannot control, obviously, but some of us are in situations that are out of our control, and we have to get out of them first in order to have the ability to, I know I'm very lucky that I have nothing around me that's preventing me be who I can be. But when you get to that point of calm and peace in your life, your perception of reality is entirely based on what's in your head. And that's what I started realizing, that I created those boundaries. Nobody did. My parents didn't. My friends didn't. School didn't. College didn't. I did. I said that to myself. I told myself that someone like me couldn't possibly have a career in space. And all it took for me to do was to start making work that mattered to me, that I actually felt that I was doing something of value for me in my life, for me to start seeing those walls disappear and realizing, oh my God, I actually can make interesting things happen, or I actually can have an impact on the world in a way that I want to, and then that was it. Brilliant. And then I wanted more, and then kind of I just finally allowed myself be it.
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing, and I love the fact as well, then kind of like, because you look at Ireland, you look at space, and kind of there's probably a lot of people listening who probably they're like, Ireland, space, sure, like
exactly,
but I mean, like, obviously you're one of the foremost voices on it, and then Dr. Nora Patton is the other one that I always think of when I think about Ireland and space. And the fact then as well, it's two women who are at the front of this conversation.
I know,
as well.
Isn't that mad? I feel that I thought of that a few times, that I'm amazed that it is. And yet, talk about, I think that's a lot to do with the, with women supporting women, and I would say that so I would have had I would have had a career in science for years, and then I stepped away and I was acting for a fair bit just on its own and writing, and then I started bringing the two together. And when I started bringing the two together, I was so supported by women in STEM, or like women in the sciences, and those initiatives, that I think it's because of those groups and those women that helped people like me come forward. I think it's fantastic, and I hope that in this astronaut call, that a man will come forward and we'll start hearing a male voice as well, because it would be nice for it to have equal voices,
Yeah,
But yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. I agree with you.
It's I don't know, and the whole thing, and the thing is, we could sit here and we could talk for hours upon hours and upon hours of things about space, but I'm conscious it's a midweek evening, and you've been very generous with your time already. But before we let you go, there's probably just a couple of kind of quick fire questions, I guess. Not that we have them to hand, but just ones that we're kind of curious about. And I know when myself and Mara were saying, let's do something about space on the podcast. Let's do something about Mars or anything. Like, the two of us are just, I think I said to you beforehand, like two curious children who, we could Google it, but we just prefer talking to people who are interested.
So people that know about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, a lot of the talk in recent months has been around stuff going one way to Mars and then stuff coming back the other way. And there's been videos and there's been all sorts, and it's mad and fascinating. But firstly, how long does it take to get to Mars, and how long does it take for the stuff to come back?
Okay, so it's the getting to Mars from Earth takes between 7 months and 2 years, and the reason for that is, right.
Jesus.
It's very, when you understand, when you get it, you'll know what I mean. So we orbit the sun, right? Yeah. And we're slightly closer to the sun than Mars, because Mars is just the next planet beyond the sun, or beyond us, the other side of us. So we're closer to the sun, and the other side of Earth is Venus, right? So it takes 365 days for Earth to orbit the sun, and I think it takes 667 or 627 days for Mars to orbit the sun, and that's because its orbit is big. So and they're not purely circular orbits around their sun; they're kind of elliptical. So sometimes every 2 years, what happens is that the orbit of Mars and the orbit of Earth kind of are in the same side of the sun, if you know what I mean. So they're on the left-hand side of the sun at the same time. So if you launch something at that time, it's only going to take 7 months to get to Mars. Whereas if you have Earth on the left-hand side of the sun and you've Mars on the right-hand side of the sun orbiting, that's going to take way longer. So that's why it takes between 7 months and 2 years. And then, so if it takes you 7 months to get to Mars, you have to wait another 2 years for Mars and Earth to line up again to be that closely. So you wait 2 years, and then when the window's right, you get back in, and you come back, and then it takes 7 months.
So
what are you doing for 7 months then?
Yeah.
Well, nobody knows. There was one mission. There was one analog mission like mine, the simulation mission called Mars 500, kind of around about 2010. A friend of mine did it. Well, he's a colleague. I would like to think he's a friend, but it's kind of unfair for me to say it. And they were cooped up for 522 days in a habitat, in a warehouse, and they didn't go outside once in that whole time. At least we were able to go outside every day.
Jesus.
And and it was a psychological study, and they realized that the psychological study after about 150 days doesn't matter. Nothing really changes. It was really interesting. He said, and they psychologists say this, that the most dangerous time for missions is at the very start and at the very end, because euphoria kind of kicks in. So you're skittish at the start because it's all exciting, and then the hardest part is just after halfway, because you realize how much it took for you to get there to that point. And then just after halfway is very low as well. And then as you get near the end, you get skittish again, and mistakes can be made and stuff. So it's very hard to keep them balanced. And he said that food was so important. It was such a morale booster. Food is a massive thing for boosting morale when you have nothing else going on in your life. So I don't know. Nobody really knows how we're going to survive. But from those studies, you just get into your groove. And the thing I have found about astronauts is they're incredibly they're just really good at just getting on with things, and they put up with a lot, and they always a lot of them are recruited because they really understand how to be a really good team player and how to lead when they have to, and then how to follow. But most importantly, they all appreciate that they are kind of the custodians for the work of hundreds and thousands of people that have put them there. So you talk about that janitor. That's exactly, that janitor had the right mindset for the space program. So nothing can happen without everybody pulling toward in one direction, and astronauts get that. So they feel this tremendous pressure to get it right, because they know that, every minute you're in space is extremely expensive, but that also, like, if you're conducting, might have 50 or 60 experiments to when the International Space Station. So they've been shown how to do that. And every experiment that's been there has probably had about 10 years of planning, because they've had to apply, and then they get funding, and then they have to get allocated a certain mission. And so there's years of work that's going on for every second that they're up there. And every second that they're up there is actually counted, and they have to kind of keep ahead of it. So they really understand how to just get on with it. They have incredible resolve and resilience. So that's why they are astronauts. The average human wouldn't survive. And that's why I want to do it, because I want to show what somebody like me, how a real person would cope in those scenarios, because I don't believe I am an astronaut or ever will.
Until they can get spice bags and my waddy to Mars, I won't be going. I can tell you that much anyway.
Sounds good to me.
as soon as they open the Chinese takeaway on Mars, I'm there.
Yeah.
So this one's a little bit of a morbid question, but I'm curious. So the International Space Station, is there a protocol for if somebody dies up there?
Yes.
So in Everest, if someone dies on Everest, they stay on Everest. They're not brought back or anything like that. So in the space station, are they brought back? Are they buried at sea, for want of a better term, buried at space or whatever? There is a protocol.
There is protocol. It's highly proprietary, and the furthest I've got was a Surgeon General just said, I asked him once, and so Surgeon is they're the guys that kind of take care of astronauts and obviously medically and stuff, and they're trained in basic medical procedures and dentistry and hairdressing, how to administer first aid, how to conduct like basic operations and stuff. So they're given a little bit of training, and then there's also like the opportunity of telemedicine where doctors will phone in and kind of through things. But yeah, in the event of death, there is a protocol. They don't really go into the details, but they say yes, there is a protocol in place if somebody should die in space or on the International Space Station. Yeah.
Okay, but so far, thankfully, like that. Well, I don't know how to say this without coming across as like either ignorant or whatever. I know there's been obviously tragedies in terms of the launches and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But once you kind of get into orbit or whatever, I don't think there's ever been any kind of. There probably hasn't been, has there?
I'm not sure. I think something happened on the Russian side, but it's very difficult to get information on.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah. It's crazy though. The whole thing is
just fascinating.
It's just that, like space travel in general.
It is.
And I'm conscious. We said we'd chat to you for a half hour, and we're going nearly an hour now, Niamh. So we're
you all right? Okay.
Yeah. The last question that I want to ask, Mara will probably go. Hang on a second, don't go anywhere. But in terms of the mission to Mars and everything else, then realistically, do you think there'll be humans walking on Mars in the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I think next 30 years, yeah. You have to look at Elon Musk. You just have to look at what man is driving forward, and the teams of brains of people and the money that has been thrown into it. They're really working extensively on this spacecraft called Starlink. So they've mastered the reusable rocket. So that's just going up and down now. And they've mastered a new spacecraft to send astronauts to the International Space Station. That's happening regularly now from Florida. And so now they're focusing on Starlink, not Starlink, Starship. And Starship is this juggernaut of a spacecraft. And that's the one that they're planning on getting to the moon and mainly to Mars. So I would say, as long as nothing happens to Elon Musk, I'd be pretty confident that we would see a human mission to Mars in the next 30 years.
Is he the modern equivalent of that Russian guy that you mentioned earlier on?
Korolev. Yeah. I would almost, I mean, I was listening to him on Joe Rogan there, the one from 2 years ago where it was all this. I was watching it last night, the scandalous one where he drank and he
upset the shareholders
and stuff. Yeah, he upset the shareholders and stuff. And he has this incredible ability of simplifying engineering, and he is one of the best engineering brains I've ever heard. He's just solutions based, and he really understands the laws of nature and the laws of physics. So he's just literally able to think of that and how to solve it. So if anyone will drive it forward, it will be him. So as long as he stays sane and healthy, I would be pretty confident that would be achieved in the next 30 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Danny, yeah. Things like interesting.
I'd say one thing, Niamh, I won't be going.
Why not?
I'm grand on Earth.
I'd go if they let me go, like as a communicator, and I'd suffer it, because I think people really need to understand that there's nothing glamorous about space. It's extremely difficult. Yeah. It is unbelievably difficult, and there's nothing easy about it. Every single thing, breathing, sleeping, eating, every normal day-to-day activity in the absence of gravity and an atmosphere gets really tough very, very fast and very dangerous.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Thanks so much for your time.
Not at all.
And as I said, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but that wouldn't be fair to you. If people want to learn more about you, and if they want to hear what you're getting up to, or follow your activities with all things space, and your book as well, which came out last year, and everything else, where can they find more of you?
So my website's niamhshaw.ie, and you can subscribe there. And I'm starting now to get myself organised to send out kind of regular newsletters and stuff. My podcast, Humans of Space, I'm working on the second series now of that. I've got some great guests lined up for that. Twitter, Dr.Niamh_Shaw, and Instagram. And then I have a few videos up on YouTube, and I have to get better. I'm going to be doing more live streams and kind of, YouTube shows and stuff like that, because there's definitely an appetite for news about space. So, yeah.
There is, but there's not enough hours in us all, Niamh.
No.
There's a science show, lads. Get in there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Niamh, thanks, Mel, for that. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks,
lads,
Niamh.
definitely go and check out everything. But, Niamh,
right.
until next time, thanks a mil.
No problem.
Thanks, Niamh. Have a good day.
Loved every second of talking to Dr. Niamh Shaw.
Space is fascinating, isn't it?
It's mental. It's so big and it's so vast, and yet nothing at the same time.
Yeah. How
is that like how can something be so full of lots of things and yet have absolutely nothing at the same time?
Yeah. Mad, isn't it?
Mad. Niamh's fascinating. A mad thing. She's
excellent. She's brilliant.
The stuff she's done, man. We didn't even get to talk to her about half it, like, do you know what I mean? But
the habitat sounded interesting. I was just listening to all that.
Stop, yeah. There's a book in that kind of stuff as well. But like, she's done training with like Russian cosmonauts, and she's like done presentations in NASA, and she's spoken at like NASA conferences and just mad stuff. So that's why when she was saying that she's just ordinary average Niamh, I was like, if you're ordinary and average, the rest of us
exactly, yeah. but that's all the modesty though, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's growing up in Dundalk for you. That's what it'll do. But she's absolutely brilliant. I love her to bits. I think she's absolutely fascinating, and I'd love if she did get to achieve her goal of getting to hit outer space at some point in time in her life.
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
But yeah, that's it. That was another one done. Another one in the books, as they say, Mero.
Yeah, and the big one next week.
Do we want to say that? Do we?
No, we don't. We just want to say that it's a big one and it's a return for his second appearance. He hasn't been on in 5 years.
Yeah, and it's still to this day one of our most popular and most listened to episodes.
That's it now. That's all we'll say.
That's all we'll say.
You listen to them?
If you want to listen to all previous 232 plus bonus episodes along the way, all you have to do is go to Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Republic, Podcast Addict, anywhere and everywhere that there is a podcast available. All you must do is enter WTSPOD and you'll find us, me and Mero, waiting for you, like lovers after the war, ready to embrace you. Or go to WTSpod.com. Wherever you go, lads, wherever you go, just do us a favour. We don't ask for it often. But just leave us a little review. Just take 2 minutes, just, give an L5 or an L4 star review and just say, yeah, these lads are all right. I endorse this kind of carry on. I approve this message.
That's gas. So that's one of the lads today. He texted me saying that he listened to Kieran McQueen and it was very good. And I says, feel free to leave a review. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. Leave a review. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can on Spotify, but I don't know, every so often people send me screen grabs. It's that very Irish thing. Your mates, like, they like to, make sure that you're not getting too ahead of yourself or anything like that. Not that we do. I mean,
yeah.
For fuck's sake, look, I'm doing this from a box room in Portlaoise, lads. Like, I'm not in any way, shape or form trying to claim it's anything like the Late Late, but I mean, mates, just taking an old screen grab of some of the negative reviews on iTunes or whatever, and they're like, this you, Dan? And I'm like, no, that's all Mero. That's all aimed at Mero, that is. No, the good reviews were about me, like, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, anyway, that's everything.
That's it, anyway.
Yeah, that's it. Manscaped.com. Use the code WTSPod to get 20% off free shipping.
Perfect. Until next week, Dan.
Clear eyes.
Full hearts.
Can't lose.
Next week we'll be saying, too sweet.